Hi everybody, it's Mike Ippersiel from the IndieBandAlliance.com, and today I am speaking with John Oszajca. Hopefully I said that right.
You got it, yeah.
Yeah, okay. John has been heard on radio stations across the world, received video airplay on MTV, and has received praise from the Los Angeles Times, Rolling Stone, People, Entertainment Weekly, the Boston Phoenix, Time, US, Howard Stern, and Elton John in Interview magazine. He has appeared in several feature films, television shows, and documentaries, as well as on CNN, Access Hollywood, Entertainment Tonight, ESPN, and Inside Edition. That's a lot of stuff, John. Well, John has toured across the country performing with such artists as Jewel, Brian Seltzer, Eve Six, the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Hilary Duff, and many others, and even at Woodstock 99. So that's John, and here he is with us.
How's it going?
Awesome.
Good,
It's an awesome day here I'm just outside of Toronto in Canada, and it's been a very long start to summer weather, and we've just gotten it the last couple of days, but I'm happily down here in my basement talking to you. So
Great.
how's it out in LA today?
It's all right. It's been sunny and warm as it always is in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, I'm kind of a cold weather guy. I like the cold weather, and I just spent much of the last year in New Zealand and managed to miss winter completely, which I suppose most people would like. But unfortunately, I went from summer to summer, and I'm a little bummed. I like some cold weather personally.
Wow. Okay. So I wanted to speak to you today about sort of where you've been as far as working with major labels and going on to doing your own kind of independent stuff.
Sure.
So do you want to just kind of just go over for, everybody how you, maybe even why you got into music in the first place, or what inspired you to become, a professional musician, and then how you got into the major label stuff?
Sure, yeah, maybe walk me through it a little so I don't drift too far off course.
Okay,
But,
yeah.
but why I started, I suppose, I don't even know. Do we know why we start? I mean, I think, I just thought it was cool. Is that too simple of an answer? I think I got my first guitar when I was 15, and I had an interest in music like everybody does to some extent, I think, off and on throughout my life, and always had a sort of a specific interest in entertainment. I was interested in acting and as well as music and anything that got me attention. I think when I was around 14, I really got hooked on, music, hard rock. I think Guns N' Roses came out with Appetite for Destruction when I was 14, and while again, like everyone, I'd been listening to music my entire life, that was when I really got hooked and became a sort of a diehard fan. And I think, like most things in my life, if I love something, it's hard for me to just sort of be a fan. I wanted to do it. And so right away I'm requesting a guitar, and I got one for my 15th birthday, and walking out of my first lesson, I bumped into another guitar player that I happened to know from school. We started a band. His brother played bass. I had a friend who played drums, and the rest is history.
Awesome. Yeah, it seems like, excuse me there, that age 14, 15 seems to be that magic time where, I mean, I think we're all aware of music, obviously, growing up. It's not like you can, not be aware of music, but for some reason around that age, everything just kind of seems to crystallize, and you either get, it seems like so many other people just start around that time as well, so.
Yeah, well, you discover the opposite sex somehow.
Well, yeah,
I think
true.
Wanting to impress them is directly linked there, but I think not only that, but that's that age where, or it's probably the end of an era where you're sort of stupid enough to not realize how bad you actually are, and you can go through those growing pains without feeling ultra self-conscious. I think, certainly at my age now, I'm 30, I don't even know how old I am. I'm 37. I just turned 37. I would be much less likely to go and stick my neck out now and start something. I think perspective, would be such that I would be aware if I was not very good at something, and I would have a hard time going out and wanting, having any desire to subject myself to the same kind of rejection and potential embarrassment that you do when you're a teenager. And I was not good when I started. I look back at some of those tapes, and I'm not being, modest. I didn't have some innate talent as a singer. I actually was flat and monotone and just not very good. But I didn't know any better, and I didn't know anyone who was, significantly better than I was in my circle. So I just kept at it, and I worked really, really hard at it. Took lessons, and fast forward a few years, and I actually had a decent voice. Add a few more years onto that, and I think I developed into a really good singer. But getting back to your point, I think. I think once you start hitting your 20s and beyond that, I think you're a little bit more aware of just how good or bad you are, and that prevents a lot of people from exploring new creative areas, I think, as at older ages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was, you were starting out. That was in Hawaii when you were first started playing, or?
Right. Yeah, I was born and raised in Hawaii. I started my first band back there. I didn't move away till I graduated high school, so I was 18.
Okay.
I was in a number of bands back in Hawaii. Played around a little bit, nothing too significant. I think things have changed a bit these days in Hawaii, but back then it was still, we didn't have cable television, at least where I lived, until,
wow.
I was 13 or something. So, we didn't have obviously the internet and all that kind of stuff, and we were still pretty isolated. I mean, it wasn't by any means the third world or something like that, but there was not a big pro rock scene over there when I was a kid, and so there really weren't that many people in bands doing what I was trying to do.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I've never actually been to Hawaii, but all I can really picture is like the grass skirts and the leis and all these kinds of things. And I know there's, I mean, that's me, my Canadian culture. I know people think about Canada and they think of igloos or Mounties or whatever. So, but yeah, I don't see, I mean, the first thing that definitely doesn't come to mind is a big, burgeoning kind of rock scene or something.
Yeah, no, it certainly wasn't that way when I was a kid. I mean, don't get me wrong; they existed. There were rock bands. I was in one of them. There were punk bands. Reggae was much bigger when I was a kid. It still is huge there, but I think things have changed. I think communication is such that just about everywhere in the world is developing much more on par with one another, or each location is developing much more on par with one another than it used to. I remember being in high school and rock and roll was still considered devil's music by most of my friends.
Yeah, for sure. So then, like you said, after high school, you ended up, you eventually landed in Los Angeles, but I guess you want to just talk a little bit about how, I mean, it must have been a pretty big move to leave Hawaii and, cross the ocean and everything. And
Sure.
I guess, were you pursuing music at that time, or were you just trying to get to the mainland and kind of see what happened?
No, from pretty much the first time I picked up a guitar, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a rock star, and
Awesome.
as soon as I graduated high school, it was, I think it was a month and a half or so. I graduated in June, and by August rather, I was off, not to Los Angeles first. I was off to Seattle. Back then, that was when, the Seattle scene was happening. It was all about Pearl Jam and Nirvana. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I went. And I spent 3 years there, and ultimately ended up doing pretty well. I got hooked up with some great people and some folks over at Kelly Curtis Management. They were, Kelly Curtis manages Pearl Jam, and Dave Meinert, who's still doing quite a lot up in Seattle, and Colleen Combs helped me out quite a bit. And Dave managed me for a few years, and I was able to get a deal with, not a deal, but a demo deal with Epic Records, and I played around for the whole time I was up there, and did a bit, but ultimately I felt like I sort of hit the ceiling, and things weren't progressing to that next level, and there were a couple personal life things happening, relationship and that kind of thing that ultimately culminated in me taking the trip down to LA and starting over down here.
Okay, so once you were out in LA, I'm just kind of amazed at already just what we've seen. You know, you haven't, at this point in the game, you haven't hit any sort of major success, but just that you know, you had the drive to kind of leave the hometown, you know, go to a completely new city where you felt the scene was better, and just kind of get entrenched and meet people and network. And you know, and then even when you got to that point, you didn't think it was going to get you to the next level you wanted to be. You left town again, and you know, went for where you felt the opportunity was better.
Yeah.
Is that something that you think? I mean, obviously, it was a factor in getting you to where you are now, but I don't know. Can you maybe speak about where do you think that came from, where you just had that drive to keep pushing to get to the next level?
You know, I don't know where that would come from. I definitely have always had drive. I don't know. You know, I just don't know. I'm not a person who, you know, it doesn't occur to me to sort of wait around. I just, you know, I want to make it happen. I want to make it happen as fast as possible. So I take action. I haven't found life to be too difficult. You know, if you take action, everything is just a problem that needs a solution. And, you know, there's a sort of approach everything is there's a wall in front of me, and I just got to figure out how to get over it, whether that's make $1 million or that's get a record deal. I mean, not to say that it's easy either, but I think that if you just sort of put your mind to the problem and figure out, you know, ask yourself what it's going to take and then take action, it's all pretty straightforward.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great advice there. So once you were in LA, kind of, I guess, take us from what happened there to your first major label hookup there.
Right. Well, let's see what happened. So I come to Los Angeles and pretty quickly realized that I you know, as a singer-songwriter, it really was, you know, I didn't think I was going to be doing myself much of a service to just be another singer-songwriter. You know, the first question people would ask when they, you know, they'd meet a musician, they'd ask if you're in a band, and I'd say, no, I'm a singer-songwriter, and they'd say, oh, so do you play open mics? And I would say, no, I'm not a guy who plays open mics. I'm a professional, goddammit. And pretty quickly just saw, you know, that LA was a town of first impressions, and it was a what can you do for me kind of town. And I mean, I don't mean to necessarily make it sound like this was all so calculated. There was some just instinct and luck at work, but I decided to, rather than to just go out there and start taking any crappy gig I sort of positioned myself as a club promoter. I mean, it was also a way to make money, to be perfectly honest, but I started working for various clubs, and again, I got thrown into it as well, or an opportunity came my way out of sheer luck, but I took advantage of it and started promoting one club that led to a couple clubs. I ultimately was doing after-hours clubs every night around town on Friday nights. So I thought, and my thinking was that by being a club promoter, again, I was sort of positioning myself as a guy who could help other people, who could maybe earn a few favors, and was more than just a musician who was looking to get something from everyone else. Instead, I had something to offer everyone else, be it just the ability to put people on a guest list, you know, managers and booking agents, and even A&R reps, all those people, I was worth their time. And LA is really a place of everyone's got 1,000 friends and everyone's got something going on. So there's this subconscious, perhaps even conscious sometimes, calculation, you know, when you meet a new person as to whether or not they're sort of worth your time and energy. And as someone who could put you on a guest list or maybe book your band or book you as a musician, I felt that it just, again, positioned me very well to make the relationships I ultimately needed for my own career, and ultimately it worked. I was able to put a good team together. I got myself a good manager and a lawyer, and I had a very large, you know, address book when it came time to finally do some showcases for the labels. I had, I had something like, this is before emails, remember, something like 1,000 phone numbers or something in my personal phone book, and I would spend, and I'm not kidding, 3 days calling every single person if ever I had a big event. It would take me from 10 in the morning until about 6 at night, 3 days to call every single person. But I do it, and as you can imagine, I had a line around the block, and when the labels all showed up and saw a line around the block, it made me look good, and it helped. I mean, I already had a few things in place when I was doing the key showcases, but it only helped reinforce the story and the value that I was trying to present, and it ultimately cinched the deal, and I got myself a record deal.
Wow. So I guess from that record deal, I guess as the story goes, that turned out to be somewhat short-lived, and you had to continue to adjust and adapt. So maybe, I guess, just take us through quickly kind of what your experience with the major label was, and your subsequent experience, because you've had more than one major label thing, and then kind of, I guess, just lead us into where you're at right now.
Sure. Well, maybe even backing up just a hair, when, even despite everything I just said about being well positioned and having the relationships and having the team, it was still really hard. I mean, I had my manager actually, first we were shopping some demos that I had done with a producer of mine, and we'd done them ourselves, so it was basically, a $0 recording, and they were good, but they weren't amazing. They weren't radio ready, and we were shopping that around a little bit, getting meetings, but not getting anybody to be seriously interested in taking the next step. And so my manager finally, out of, I don't know, I guess frustration and I don't know, actually it's kind of ballsy looking back that he did it, because he was not a rich guy by any stretch. He took, I think it was $2 or $3 grand, and took me to the Village, which is one of the best studios in the world, and we recorded some 2 radio ready tracks. And even then, shopping those around, we were getting a little more interest, but still no one was cutting any, offering to cut any checks. And then finally one day he got a call from someone over at Capitol, and they were very interested, and that led to it being the single for a soundtrack on Capitol for a movie called Clubland that no one has probably ever heard of. But the track became the single, and it started getting heavy radio play, and it started getting phones, and it started spreading around the country, and I had no record deal yet. And when you're in that position, when you've got radio and no record deal, everybody wants you, and the phone, as you can imagine, was ringing off the hook, and I think I had 8 offers. There was virtually no major label that didn't either make a physical offer or express the interest in making an offer if we were interested. And it was ultimately Interscope that we signed with. I say we, as we in the sense of my team, my manager, myself, my lawyer, my producer. But it was Interscope that I signed with, and I was on the label for, I can't remember now, 2 years, 1.5 years, something like that. But signed with the label, and it's just, I don't know, I don't want to be one of those guys that blames the label. It just ultimately didn't work. There were some changes in the industry. At the time that I signed, this is in 1999. I don't know if anyone can remember that far back, but what was on the radio were bands like Beck and Sugar Ray and No Doubt, and that was what was considered mainstream alternative. Is that even proper English, mainstream alternative? But you know what I'm saying, top 20 alternative. And my record didn't come out until May of the following year of 2000, and alternative music had changed dramatically in that time. And when it came out, I don't know, this was the year of active rock, if you remember that, where Korn and Limp Bizkit and even Metallica and Suicidal Tendencies was back. And in the top 20 at alternative, that was like everything was active rock. There was, I think, No Doubt, it was maybe the only band that week that was not active rock, and they were considered to be struggling at that time because there was just not, people were into this heavy sound, and there wasn't room for much else. So they released me at Pop and Hot AC, And so my record literally came out, you know, it was a record that sonically was more akin to Beck, and it came out against Madonna, like as in literally Madonna dropped her record the same day I dropped mine. And so it was just rough going. And, you know, I mean, we got some radio and got some video play and had a little bit of love, but it wasn't enough. And for the labels, it's sort of all or nothing. And so yeah, a year later or whatever it was, I get a call from my lawyer saying I've been dropped. There were no big conversations with the label. There was no debates. There was no, you know, infighting. There was just nothing. I thought all was sweet, and then one day I got a letter saying I was dropped. And that's the reality for, I think, 99% of musicians out there. Even I'll leave their names out of it, but a lot of friends who you've heard of who have sold millions of records, and they too get dropped. I mean, pretty much everyone gets dropped. There are very few artists who survive. I mean, Madonna and those kind of folks. But even some of the really successful ones that recover with their next deal, inevitably sales wane low enough that the labels can't justify the advances that they've guaranteed, and that was certainly the case with me. And you know, the labels cut their losses. So after that, I still had a very large publishing deal, and the way a publishing deal works is they commit to certain amounts of money, but you need to meet certain benchmarks. In other words, for me, I needed to release my album on a major label, or at least I needed to release it with major distribution, or else they were not going to release the remaining funds, and the remaining funds were a lot. Like, we're talking, you know, $500,000 or something. And so I was, honestly, while financially it was a great thing, artistically it was a terrible thing, because it put me on a several-year sort of swimming upstream journey to just sign a deal. It wasn't about making music, and it wasn't about getting back out there, and it wasn't about building a career. It was about getting a deal, and that's not really the way you want to be looking at your artistic life, you know. And so so we struggled. Ultimately, we're able to pull off a deal with Universal. We had some relationships. My manager had some relationships over there. Ultimately, there was some shifting around. The record did not get put out, and therefore I was dropped from that deal, and then got re-signed to a Warner Brothers subsidiary called The Record Collection, and they put it off. That was just a one-off deal, so I wasn't actually dropped from that. We only had an agreement to put out one album, and then more recently, it's still a few years ago now, I put out an album on an independent label called Dreamy Draw. So I've put out 3 records, and had 4 deals now. And to be honest, while I certainly appreciate it, all the people I've worked with, because ultimately they did take a chance on me, and at the end of the day, the product didn't move, you know, like it needed to. I found all of it to be a rather disheartening experience, because as an artist, when you sign a deal, you expect the label to move the units. You expect them to be the marketing muscle, and you sit around and you ask, how many copies did I sell? And that's about it. And you're really not in control of your destiny. And you know, looking back on it all, you know, I don't know, because financially it was so rewarding. It's hard to say I would have taken a different path, but certainly if I was to start over, if I was, you know, 18 again, just graduating high school and setting out to try to build a music career, I would have approached it very differently.
Yeah, totally. So so basically, with the fallout from that is how you wanted to take your destiny into your own hands, and you kind of started to dive into the marketing end of things. Is that that's my understanding, or
sort of? I mean, what actually happened was, it was on my last record, the one that came out on Dreamy Draw.
Yeah.
I was, you know, I'm sure most people listening to this, you know, were around during the whole MySpace heyday.
Yes.
Most musicians, it's funny that that's now becoming ancient history, MySpace. But most people remember using MySpace bots, robots that went out and effectively spammed people. And that was what every musician I knew was using to try to get the word out. And we all got tens of thousands of friends, and that was about it. We didn't see any sales as a result. But I was playing with that like everybody else, and I would be in the forums, and I would see all these people who are not musicians who are clearly doing something and clearly making money, and I would get the same spam that everybody else would, and I didn't understand it, but I knew people were making money, and I'd see occasionally those big red headlines promising, make money in your underwear or while you sleep or whatever they said, and my advance money was starting to run low, and I was going to need to make some money at some point, and I fortunately still did have some savings, so I had some time, and I took a chance, bought one of those courses that promised to show me how to make money online, and lo and behold, I followed the steps. I set up a campaign. This was a course that relied on pay-per-click advertising, and logged in the next morning, and to my shock, I actually sold a copy of something, and
wow.
it was an ebook that I was promoting, and I did not go on to make millions of dollars, but I sold something, and I saw, wow, you can actually sell things. People actually buy stuff. This isn't a scam. And it still took me, I was still very confused by how it all worked. This was just one tiny little tip of the iceberg of online marketing. And I started just doing the research. I started talking to other people. I spent a lot of time, surprisingly, just trying to figure out what it was. What is online marketing? How does it work? I didn't understand what these people were doing, and I couldn't seem to get a clear explanation of it without spending thousands of dollars. I remember going down to Florida to hang out with some guys that I just met online. They were the support people of one of these MySpace bots, and I had carved out some kind of a email relationship. Finally got on the phone with the guy, talked about some ideas of possibly working together. Flew down to Florida to hang out with these guys. Turned out to be like 19-year-old kids, very smart 19-year-old kids. They're probably rich right now, but just anything I could is really what I'm getting at to figure this out, even if it took flying across the country just to hang out with someone and look over their shoulder. And slowly the pieces started to come into focus, and I started understanding the process. I tooled around for a good, I can't remember, honestly, 6 months to a year before I was making any serious money. Right off the bat, I did start seeing some cigarette money, as they say, but nothing significant, nothing I could live on. But I knew that there was something there, and I knew it could work. I just needed to get better at it. And I'm not kidding you. I don't know how many courses and books I've read on the subject, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's thousands. I mean, I became a junkie for this stuff and started reading and consuming every single thing that I could. And I think that's one of the keys there is I didn't try just one thing, have it fail, and then quit. I read everything and did everything I could, as referenced, even flying across the country, to just figure this thing out. And it wasn't easy, but I did finally sort of crack the code. I had my first hot product on my hands, and I was seeing some real money coming in. This is back, I started with this particular product back in 2008, I think it was, to May of 2008, and over the last 3 years, I'm coming up to 1.5 million as we speak.
Wow!
In sales, not all of that's profit. That's gross sales, but good portion of it is, and I've been doing really well with it. So to answer your question, that was a long-winded way of responding to your question, but I started. It's kind of been a full circle. I became aware of online marketing as a result of trying to promote my own music. Quickly realized there was a lot more money in non-music related things. We'll get into that in a little bit, but music's one of the hardest things to sell because it's so subjective, because it doesn't meet a specific need, you know.
It doesn't solve a specific problem or anything
right,
like that. Yeah.
Right, and it doesn't even have a really measurable or tangible quality. Like even something like movies, which are still subjective, there's a general consensus as to whether or not a story is good or bad, you know. Just a general consensus, but most people can walk out of even a mediocre movie and at least acknowledge its basic value, but that's not true of music. You can have you know, an artist that sells 10 million copies and somebody else thinks it's absolute garbage. I mean, there's no real measurable thing. You're not really trying to appeal to people by convincing them your product is good. You're trying to appeal to people by convincing them that your product is cool, and that is freaking hard to do.
Yes.
So without going too far down that track, I quickly realized there was a lot more money in other products, and because that was my goal at the time, was to refill the coffers, I just dove into marketing in general. All the while, I was very, very aware that I was giving myself power as an artist. I very much think that marketing is power. A lot of people think marketing is, musicians actually think marketing is evil, and it's somehow contrary to their actual aims. That somehow if you talk about business or if you acknowledge the business of what you're doing, that you're somehow not true as an artist. God bless you if that's how you feel. That's definitely never been my attitude. I see it as power. I have a mark I want to make on the planet as an artist, as a creative person, and by understanding marketing, I have a greater chance of doing that. And so I love this stuff. And so all the while I was very aware that I was serving my ultimate goals as a creative person. I don't only make music. I've started writing books, and I've got a book under my belt that I need to get out there, and I'm interested in film and all kinds of stuff. So by doing this stuff, I knew I was creating an avenue to potentially sell all that stuff and to not have to rely on the industry, because it is damn hard when you need to sit around and wait for somebody else to give you money or to move your career forward. And I did plenty of that, and I have no interest in doing it any longer.
Now, when you were studying, when you mentioned that sort of initial 6 months where you were kind of trying to figure out, you bought your course or whatever, and you were trying to figure things out, what were you doing musically? Were you doing this full time, or were you still kind of working on music or writing music as well?
I'm always working on music.
Okay.
There has been a general sort of slowdown over the last couple of years. I mean, remember when I first started, I had just put a record out, so I was doing some touring, and I was doing some stuff at the very beginning, and then truthfully, things kind of were put on pause while I started focusing on making money. And so there were a couple of years there where things, I was always writing, and I was always, I never completely neglected music, but definitely things sort of were put on the back burner for a little while. But over the last year, I've been back in the studio. I've got a new album that is almost finished. Hopefully I'll have it out either by the end of this year or the beginning of next. So no, by no means did I ever completely stop making music.
Okay. So now I guess, kind of listening to your story here, I heard a couple of different themes that I'm going to touch on just at the end, just to kind of recap for everyone who's listened. But, at the point that you're at now, like you said, you had, you're approaching 1.5 million in kind of gross sales. For like the online stuff that you're doing, you're obviously you're still doing your own music. You're doing internet marketing. You're doing music marketing. You're consulting. You've recently you put out. I guess how about you let us know where you decided to kind of to put out your first music related product anyway that I'm aware of with Music Marketing Manifesto. Like, what
Sure.
kind of got you to the point where you decided, other musicians need to know more about this marketing stuff, or what kind of inspired you to do that product?
Sure. Well, as anyone who works online sort of knows, you're just constantly coming up with ideas and exploring new markets. It's not usually, you don't find too many sort of online entrepreneurs who just have one website, that's it, and that's all they ever do. Usually, I mean, I've probably got 100 domains, and each one of those represents a project or an idea that I had that I started exploring, and for the most part, typically I abandon because I've got probably less than half a dozen that actually bring in any kind of regular money. But you're always exploring new things and looking for things that you can do, and if you can do something that you enjoy, then all the better. And so it became fairly obvious to me at some point that I should look into creating a course for musicians. I'm a musician. I dig dealing with musicians, talking to musicians, and serving that community. And so I decided, well, heck, every time I get together with a musician friend, I'm spending hours telling them all this stuff they can do. Why don't I put that together in a book? And I think, well, you're aware, the listeners may not be aware, but a few years ago, I actually, pretty early in my career, I put together a ebook called Music Marketing Manifesto. This is the first release, and I never did anything with it. I put it out, got very busy with something else, never did a launch, never promoted it, never sent emails to my list, like truly did nothing other than make it available. I mean, I of course, I stand by the product, and I put sincere effort into creating it, but then once it was up, I just got busy and neglected it. I always had a little bit of doubt that musicians would really be interested in paying for the solutions, because like we've talked about, often you hear musicians really sort of cursing the business side of things. So I really wasn't sure if there was a market there. And while I do dig it, for me to dedicate time to it at this stage of my life, there needs to be profitability there, or I just can't do it. So I put it out there, got busy, neglected it. And to my surprise, I consistently sold copies for a couple of years. I'd have affiliates find it on their own. Because there's not a lot of product out there in that world, and they'd promote it, and I'd sell copies, and I wasn't selling anything crazy, a couple copies a week, but the thing sold. And as I was more recently looking to my next market, I've always had that nagging voice, in the back of my head saying you should really do more with that music marketing project. And I finally decided to give it a real go, and I revisited the product and really updated it, flushed it out, added, initially, like I said, it was just an ebook. I updated the manual to cover a lot of the new platforms that have emerged since I first wrote it, and then created, I think it's 23 videos, added some additional PDFs and some audio interviews, website templates, an interactive members area, just a ton of stuff, and re-released it in December. That was just a beta launch, and so it was only out for like a week, and then I did quite well, actually, and then I took it off the market for a little while and just sort of worked with the people that were in there and listened to what everyone had to say, did a little more tweaking, and then re-released it, and it's been available since late January, and continues to do well. People joining every day, and got a really awesome little community of musicians who I'm working with regularly, and it's been a surprise to me how well it's done, and how while there is certainly a breed of musician who's not interested in this stuff, there is definitely a minority of musicians who are very eager to learn more about marketing, and it's been awesome to get to communicate with those people. I feel like I've got, you read about this stuff as we haven't talked about your experience with marketing. I'm guessing you have probably, dove in, how do I say that? Dove. You have
dived in?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, dove.
I can't work that out. I'm sure you know this stuff fairly well yourself, but you hear about creating communities, serving the market, and you usually go, yeah, bullshit. All you want to make is money, and it is usually bullshit. And hey, what I want to do here is make money. I don't want to bullshit anybody, but certainly it is been really rewarding to have this community of musicians who I'm communicating with on a regular basis. And most rewarding is to get the emails where people are actually seeing success. You know, I can't tell you how many emails I've got from people who are selling copies. I have one member who, she mentioned that she had spent 3 years. I think I'm getting all this right. It was about 3 years building a mailing list of about 1,500 people, and then within a month of implementing the strategy, she had doubled the mailing list. And she moved from, and as a result, within that same month, she went from, I think, number 50 in her category on Amazon to number 17, which is, if anyone knows, you know, it's kind of a big deal because now you're on the first page of results on Amazon. And it makes you technically an Amazon bestseller, and then things sort of snowball from there. But on the other end of the spectrum, I get emails from people who, one member, you know, he was sent me an email recently saying that he's selling about a CD a day, and while, you know, that doesn't sound like a huge number, that, you know, he hadn't sold anything prior to this, and most musicians, despite the fact that everyone lies about how many albums they sell, and you do it, you in the proverbial sense, it's just damn hard to sell friggin' albums, and most musicians, I think the stat is, are selling, you know, 3 or 4, maybe 5 albums a year off of their website, and so to be moving one a day, you know, again, this is not the end-all be-all of this guy's career, but he was blown away, and it was just really awesome to hear, because that's a real result. It's a real person seeing change in his life as a result of this material.
Well, I think I recall seeing a stat somewhere that said, like, the average amount of albums sold by a major label artist was something like 900 a year or something like that. So if you factor in, if this person you're mentioning is, you know, selling, you know, approximately one a day, and they're doing it independently, and they're taking, you know, most of that money is pretty much all coming back to them, then that's going to be a much better scenario, that they're also going to have full artistic control over, you know, what they do and everything else. So I mean, it doesn't sound like much if you say, well, I sold, you know, 365, you know, discs or whatever, but, you know, at least it's on your terms, and sort of going way back to what you talked about with that first internet marketing course, whenever you took the steps, and then suddenly, you know, one day you turned it on and you had a sale, and you just had that kind of light bulb go off. It's just seeing, you know, at the end of, you know, taking all this action to get that, you know, that positive signal that this is working. That's, you know, that's the funny thing when you get into, you know, doing this online stuff, you know, whether you're trying to sell an ebook or whether you're trying to sell a download or whatever, it's like, it's oftentimes that first little sale you get, it might only be, you know, you might only make a little 99-cent, you know, commission or something, but it's like, whoa, this is working, right? And you remember that more than the subsequent ones when you're making 20, you know, 30, $100 or whatever it is. So
sure.
So yeah, it is pretty major achievement to do that.
Well, and everything is scalable. I mean, and as this person acknowledged in their email, that was what he was so excited about. He had just begun. Once you develop a system that works, you can expand. You can do more of it, essentially, and sell more copies. And the goal, I think, for anyone doing this stuff is to ultimately build a successful system and then outsource it. You can outsource things quite well. It's surprising how inexpensive some of this stuff is. You know, there are simple solutions like paid advertising. It can get tricky with music because the profit margin is so small, but there are, you know, so it's often difficult to turn a profit with paid advertising. By no means impossible, but a lot of the stuff that I cover in the course, I do touch on paid stuff, but I cover a lot of free methods of traffic, and that's the kind of stuff that you start off typically doing by yourself, and then once you get something that works, you hand it over to an employee that you can hire someone overseas to do a lot of this stuff for just a few $100s a month in a lot of cases. You know, you can even theoretically get your street team to do it for you, and have some free volunteers. You could pick up an intern. You know, there's so many different ways you could do it. The most important thing is to develop a successful system. I mean, we haven't really touched on it, but to try to give folks the 60-second version or whatever, which in my case is usually more like the 900-second version. But the core, what I'm trying to basically teach people, and some of this might make sense, maybe it won't. Most musicians are taking a branding strategy. That's what the major labels do. They go out and just spend a whole lot of money and try to make the general public aware of something, with the hope that if they are correct in their assumption that the music and the lifestyle and the image that they're selling is, pitch perfect, that when there is mass awareness, it's going to catch on, people are going to like it, and they're going to experience that tipping point, and the artist is going to become successful. So when independent artists go out there, they tend to just do the same thing. They tend to just play gigs, put up flyers, spray paint their band's name on the sidewalk or whatever people are doing these days, and hope that they're going to experience that tipping point, and people are going to just love the music enough that they're going to become successful. And I'm sure it's happened, but that is you're really stacking the odds against you to take that approach. What I'm teaching people is effectively direct response marketing, but for musicians. Direct response marketing is simply that. You're trying to solicit a direct and measurable response via your marketing. So in other words, if I go and write an ad or a letter and put that in front of people, I am looking for a consistent and measurable response. In other words, 2% of people who read this ad click on it, and 1% of those people actually buy it. You're looking to get a measurable response, a measurable conversion rate, and then scale that up. Another element to that is using psychological triggers to actually solicit the sale. That is something. There are a number of things, like one of the ones I often talk about is scarcity. You'd be shocked how well some of this stuff works. We see it all the time as consumers, and a lot of what stands out in our minds is the cheesy versions of this, because it doesn't have to be cheesy or over the top, but by any means. In fact, some of the most effective marketing you probably didn't even realize you were being marketed to. But something like scarcity, where I've seen some musicians starting to do this recently, where they'll release their album not on iTunes. They'll make it an exclusive experience, and they'll maybe print it on vinyl so they can justify only putting 1,000 copies out into the marketplace. And when you do that and you walk people through what's basically called a sales funnel, this is I don't want to go too far off course. A sales funnel is something, basically it's a strategy or a theory developed back in, I think it was the early 1900s, but it took sales and tried to create a sort of, again, a specific and measurable process. So walking into any sales opportunity, the salesman knew exactly where it could assess where he was in the process, where the consumer was in this process of buying, this sort of psychological process that we all go through before we decide to make a decision. I'm throwing myself off, so I'm sure I'm confusing people, but effectively what I'm trying to do is teach people how to create a sales funnel, how to use these sales triggers, these direct response marketing tactics to create systems that actually work. So in other words, you drive visitors through one end of this sales funnel, you send them to a website, and the process takes over, and at the other end you have a measurable and consistent conversion rate. And once you have that, you can, if you've got your metrics in place, once you have that, you guaranteed some level of success, and that's what I'm trying to teach people. It's not to say that this stuff is simple, and it's not to say that it's going to be easy to sell 1 million copies. It's by no means is it going to be easy. But I think, I don't know about I don't know about everyone listening, but to me as a musician, as an artist, all I really want, the minimum of what I want, is to have an audience, to have a consistent number of people constantly coming into my pipeline, so that when I make art, when I create music and put it out there, there are people waiting to consume it, and you've got that audience. Whether that audience is 200 strong or 200,000 strong, not to say that it's irrelevant, but it's secondary to the fact that you do have an audience, and that's what I'm teaching people how to do on a pretty consistent level. I don't know. I don't want to go as far as to saying anything is guaranteed when it comes to anything that's even remotely financially related, because you can't legally do that. But no. I don't see how, if you build any kind of a sales funnel, you can't get some measurable response and then only improve that sales funnel and scale it up from there. So
Sorry. Yeah. It just, I mean, it comes down to the person has to take action, right? Like you can tell them every last step to take, but if they're not willing to take those steps, then you can't guarantee what the results are going to be, because it so much depends on the individual and what they're willing to do, so to make it happen. So yeah.
Sure.
Well, I guess I'm trying to be aware of time here. I just wanted to say that basically the way I kind of discovered, internet marketing. I came from a totally different kind of background, and I was doing music and such as well, not full time, but basically in my instance, what happened was I had my second son was born, and sort of the economic realities kind of hit me, and I was at the point where I was like, okay, I can't just work a day job, do the, and try to squeeze the band in on nights and weekends wherever I can. I need to find some way to make more money. So, I was kind of typical musician in the sense that I kind of said, money's not important, and I didn't really understand the marketing too much about it. And then I ended up just diving into it, because I realized that if I have any chance of kind of getting to where I wanted to be with music, I needed to learn how the way marketing works and money works, so that way I could get it working for me instead of against me. So by the time I found the Music Marketing Manifesto, I think I only found it last year. And so for me, I really started diving in around 2007 into the internet marketing stuff. So I think you actually released it around 2007, but I didn't find it until I think it was last year, and then maybe a little bit earlier than that, but I didn't contact you until last year. So by the time I actually got my hands on it, I had learned a lot of what you were teaching in that ebook, but the difference being is, if I had found your book and just bought it from you, it could have saved me like potentially hundreds of hours of piecing, grabbing this little piece over here. Because for me, I was so hard up for cash, I didn't even have like a couple $100 to invest in different programs. I was signing up for all these different lists, and I'm learning a snippet from here and a snippet from there and piecing it together, and that's I definitely, if you don't, I guess one of the things you learn about with money is, time is more valuable than money. And when you don't have money, you figure your time, well, I'll just put more time into it, but you can never get more time. You never get time back. If you win a lottery tomorrow, you can have more money than you know what to do with, so.
Sure.
So yeah, I just definitely recommend for anyone listening that if they want to learn more about the marketing side of it, the sales funnels and stuff that you were just talking about, I can't think of a better person, because you're generating the 1.5 million, that's a lot of sales.
Sure.
And so you've obviously learned how that aspect of it works, and I think it's really cool that you've still kept one foot into the, like, obviously you're still a musician at heart, you're still making music, and you still have that creative side of you, but you've also managed to figure out the marketing and the sales end of things and what's working, and you've decided to offer what to musicians, because that's the other thing is you can go out and learn all this internet marketing and direct marketing stuff, but to be able to apply that to the music industry, the music business itself, the music industry itself is so far behind. And so whenever I discovered you and realized here's someone that's been, done the major label stuff, doing the indie stuff, and doing the marketing stuff, the internet marketing stuff. It's just I can't think of anyone else that's out there doing that. So people can figure this stuff out. It's on their own, but it's going to be a lot of time compared to someone like yourself that's got the experience, that's already doing it, and that's already learned, what's working as far as marketing music online. And the other thing cool, like, I mean, I'm on your list, and I saw there a month or so back where you were doing some testing with Facebook fan pages and stuff like that. So it's really cool to see, you're still learning. You're not saying, hey, I know everything, listen to me. You're like, you've got what's working on, the different stuff, like with the emails and squeeze pages and all this, but you're continuing to learn and expand into, the social media, different aspects of social media and what's working kind of like right this second, and sharing that with these people that, even the people on your list, or whether they're, members in Manifesto 2.0 or not. But so that's really cool. So that's a big reason why I wanted to talk with you today and share that with anyone that comes to IndieBandAlliance.com, and because I think it's like I said, I learned a lot of this stuff, but it took a lot of time. Sure. I didn't have the option initially to just go to the one source and just go, okay, this is what I need to learn. And I found it pretty mind-blowing that when you launched Music Manifesto 2.0 that you were just charging the one-time fee. It wasn't like a continuous monthly charge. Is that still the case?
Yeah, yep, it is.
So that, to me, that's mind-blowing.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen some people come out with some stuff since that have pushed the ceiling on prices that have made me kind of go, damn, maybe I need to raise my prices. But yeah, no, currently you can get musicmarketingmanifesto.com for a one-time payment. But to touch on something that you mentioned earlier in terms of the always testing and always learning. I mean, the internet is changing constantly. Look, the principles of sales and the principles of marketing have been basically the same since the beginning of time. Certainly for the last 100 years. And I'd say direct response marketing, principles have been the case since the sales funnel concept was created earlier in the century, or the last century. But all you're doing is you're driving traffic to an offer. That offer is framed in a way to touch on specific buying triggers, and then you are trying to maximize profit by building a relationship and introducing continuity or back-end offers to those same people. Like that in itself is fairly simple. The platforms with which you do, I can't speak. The platforms with which you do this, specifically the traffic generation part of this, they are always changing. Google was the unquestionable king. I mean, it still obviously is close to it, but Facebook is rapidly catching up on them. We may be looking, I think Facebook is actually surpass them in terms of the amount of daily page views that they receive. We may be looking at a future where Google has become much less important, much less significant to where and how people experience the internet. We may not. Google may, adapt as well and maintain its sort of control over things. But the point being, like, even gigantic platforms like that can change dramatically, and we need to always be testing, always be learning. There's nobody out there. I do very well at this stuff. I make a lot of money, and sure, there's stuff that I'm constantly learning, and that's what I'm trying to do for musicians, is create a sort of one-stop shop, or a platform where people can sort of sign up, and if they just want free advice, they'll get plenty of it on my list. If they want to sort of learn the hardcore, in-depth version of all this, they can They can check out my course, Music Marketing Manifesto 2.0. There's also actually a free video that I put together which explains perhaps a lot of what I've been talking about in a little more detail. And if you sign up for that, people will get a free website template as well, and a bunch of cool stuff. So that might be something that people want to check out if they're interested in getting started in this. It'll give you all the fundamentals and get you started on the path to implementing a lot of this stuff. And people can check it out at what's the domain we've thrown together? It's indiebandalliance.com/go/M-Manifesto 2.0, correct?
That's right, yeah. And there should be a link underneath this
Okay.
wherever they're listening to it. But yeah, that's also how to get to it.
Okay, cool. And that'll take you to something where you can sign up and watch this first video for free. And again, like I said, I'll be sending everyone who signs up a website template a couple days later, and you can get started for nothing.
Excellent. Well, John, I really appreciate having this chance to talk with you. It's been, I guess, probably about an hour or so, and I guess that's what happens when you get two long-winded guys that love to talk about music and marketing and just letting her rip. So the thing that kind of strikes me at the end of this conversation is when I would look at kind of the path that you took. Yeah, you were more than willing to leave your comfort zone. You left Hawaii, you flew over to the mainland and relocated several times. You were driven. The big thing too is you took action. You didn't just wait around for stuff to happen. You're out there pressing the flesh. You're networking. You're making inroads wherever you could. And then the fact that when something wasn't working for you, you were willing to to dive into the research, to learn more, to talk to people, to risk failing, like to fail repeatedly until something starts working for you. I mean, that's a big thing with just about anything you do in life, right? Like, I mean,
Sure.
We're always told, don't fail, but that's the best way to learn. So, but the thing that I find really funny is, after this hour or so of talking, we haven't really mentioned the word talent at all. It's all been, like talent, I guess it's subjective, but I guess there's just so many people who want to be making, a career as a musician, and they think, well, I got to be an awesome guitar player, an awesome singer. And it's just such, they think about talent and then being good enough to get a record label, deal, and then that's as far as it goes for them. It just kind of, after that, the magic fairies take over and the cash shows up and you're touring stadiums or whatever it is, right? And the reality is there's a lot more, talent is, I don't know what kind of a percentage you would put on it, but like whether it's a quarter of the equation or a tenth of the equation or whatever, but there's so much more that's involved, and
yeah, I almost want to say talent is irrelevant, and I don't literally mean that talent doesn't matter, because to some extent, in almost every success example, there is talent there. So yeah. I'm not saying it's irrelevant, but I'm saying I don't think it necessarily matters in the sense that, let's take Bob Dylan, for example. Most would agree that he may not be the most pleasant singer in the world, and yet he's my favorite singer-songwriter, one of the most loved singer-songwriters in history. And it's his voice that we're buying and that we're listening to. Sorry, my son has come home and he's making noise in the other room. Hopefully that's not bleeding through too much. And by contrast, there are plenty of other fantastic, classically trained singers out there that we've never heard of or we don't care about, because I think what ultimately sells, at least on the sort of X factor end of things, is personality and lifestyle and culture, much more than the specifics of the talent. If you can make music with a garbage can or a leaf blower, and if you can put that together in some kind of a way that is cool, that does touch the human heart, and imagination, then you can be successful at that. Or you can be a virtuoso and have completely mastered your instrument or your vocal cords, or lyrics, or whatever it is your sort of angle, and you can succeed that way too. There are certainly people who appreciate the craft for the craft's sake, but it's somewhat irrelevant to what makes us successful, I think. I think what makes us successful is, again, personality and experience, and that's where marketing comes in. It helps us frame that experience in a way that is going to get us the best possible result, is going to allow people to experience it in the best possible way, in the way that we want them to.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a little catchphrase I've been saying to myself the last little while, is just that marketing adds meaning, and if anybody that's ever played it to an empty club, can understand that, if you can, talent is one thing. Like, you could paint the Mona Lisa, but if you, shove it under your bed or you bury it in your backyard, nobody ever sees it, then it's, it's kind of all moot at the end of the day. It doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, you've got your music marketing manifesto, which I think's the best way to go for any musicians that want to learn about marketing their music and getting out there in front of, finding their audience and getting their stuff out there. And again, the link for that is www.indiebandalliance.com/go/M-Manifesto 2.0. Thanks a lot, John.
Thank you. And just to clarify, though, that's going to take folks to Music Marketing Blueprint, which is a free training series. So just wanted to avoid a little confusion there. But at that same site, if they go to the homepage, they can find the course.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, John.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. And there's so much to discuss. Maybe we'll have you back in the future, and we'll talk some more.
Sounds great.
Excellent.
Take care.
Yeah. You too.